All right, so like I had mentioned, my name is Angelina Romano. I'm joined here today by Justine Bressler. She's my other co-commission member in planning this event. We also have Stephanie Spurgeon with the Domestic Violence Shelter of Cumberland and Perry Counties, and Ella Leary. So we're going to be having a training today about understanding the process and getting a PFA. We are hosting this training through, again, the Cumberland County Commission for Women. So we are a organization that works through Cumberland County to actually seek to increase opportunities for women and girls. We identify and promote awareness for pertinent issues that we feel are affecting the community. The commission is a volunteer organization and we're always looking for new members. So I will be putting information in the chat about what the Cumberland County Commission for Women is. If any of you are interested in joining the commission, certainly send me an email, reach out to us on Facebook. We'd love to chat more. So a couple housekeeping items. We're going to ask that you guys remain muted and that all questions are asked at the end of the presentation. If you could plug your questions into the chat, we'll actually read them at the end. And then if you asked a question and you're hoping for some clarification, certainly feel free to unmute and ask further clarification of our facilitators. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Stephanie and Ella.
Thank you so much. We want to thank the commission for having us today. We're really excited to be able to share this information with you. You never expect to need this information, but it's really good to have and to kind of keep in your back pocket. I'm excited that there's so many of you on the training today, because I think that's important that, as a community, we care about others and, we want to understand this process. So I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Stephanie Spurgeon, and I am the Direct Services Supervisor for Domestic Violence Services of Cumberland and Perry County. And I have Ella Leary. She's our Senior Legal Advocate. She's been doing this job for about 5 years. She is our expert. We'll save all of the hard questions for Ella, so just keep those in your pocket only for her. So thank you again for joining us. So we are, DVSCP is our acronym. We're a nonprofit, and all of our services that we provide to the community are free. And so that is giving access to all survivors of domestic violence. We provide counseling, legal advocacy, emergency shelter, and many other services we'll talk about later as we go, but just want to give you a little brief of who we are. And if you don't mind, just so we know everyone kind of can access the chat, if you want to tell us, who you are and where you're joining us from, just to kind of give everybody a little practice chatting. Thank you. We will ask you to kind of send some of your answers later in the chat and on the poll. So just so that everybody can, I'm glad it looks like you can. Everyone knows where that's at. That's perfect. You're already doing really well. Okay. All right. So like I said earlier, people don't go into relationships expecting this outcome, but we know from statistics that almost every 20 people every minute are being physically abused by an intimate partner. 1 in 3 women, 1 in 4 men have experienced some type of abuse during an intimate relationship. So like slapping, pushing, shoving. That number is 1 in 4 and 1 in 7 have experienced severe physical violence. So some type of severe assault or strangulation. So that's a lot of people. We know the statistics are high. We every year are fielding almost 2,000 hotline calls in Cumberland and Perry County. In the last year, we did over 400 protection from abuse orders, and those were the numbers of people that we provided shelter to. These were our old numbers. We're in the process of calculating the statistics, and we know that all of the numbers from the last fiscal year are higher than this. So there is a need in our area. We know this is happening to people, and so we're glad that you're here to get the information to kind of help someone in your community or help yourself, help a friend.
Okay, so like Stephanie said earlier, my name is Ella. I am a legal advocate for DVS. So a big part of this training is going over what a protection from abuse order actually is. And so I'm going to be referring to it from here on out as a PFA. That's what we typically refer to them as. A lot of people call us interested in a restraining order. Pennsylvania does not actually have restraining orders. We just have protective orders. And so a PFA is one of those protective orders. And in Pennsylvania, a PFA can give reliefs to victims of domestic violence for up to 3 years to stop the abuser from having contact or from abusing the victim. It can also order things like evicting someone from the home, returning personal property. There can be some limited custody in protection from abuse orders as well, because a lot of times those things will intersect. We can go to the next slide. So something that we like to remind people, and I hear judges remind people all the time as well, that protection from abuse orders is just one tool in a larger plan to be safe. So you have to remain diligent because it's not the end all be all. So, and when we're looking at who can obtain a PFA, there is a specific relationship requirement that has to be met. So there has to be either a relationship that is by blood or marriage or an intimate partner. So typically the most commonly filed one is from current or former intimate partners. But you can also file against a family member. And you can also file on behalf of a minor. So a parent or adult household member can file for minors. So I'm not going to read each bullet point here. We're actually going to go into them in specifics in the next slides. But this is the Protection from Abuse Act. So we'll get into each bullet. So the first one is attempting to cause or intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly causing bodily injury. So the important part of this is causing or attempting to cause. So even if you say the abuser shoves you and you're not actually injured, they still attempted to injure you. So that would fall under a PFA. And the other important part is that no criminal culpability is required. So a lot of people call us and say, I don't know if I can file because I didn't tell the police about this. There were no charges pressed. With the PFA, that does not matter. There doesn't need to be any criminal charges. The next one is placing another in reasonable fear of imminent serious bodily injury. So actual physical injury is not required. And then specific intent of the perpetrator is not required. So an example of that, we get some cases where the abuser is driving really erratically with you in the passenger seat and slamming on their brakes, grabbing the steering wheel. So that would put a reasonable person in fear for their safety. But if it goes to court, the abuser might say, oh, I didn't mean to scare them. That's just how I was driving. So as long as those actions put you in fear for your safety, it doesn't matter what the intent was. And so verbal threats can apply even if they're not in writing. So even if it's like a phone conversation, it can apply. Number 3 is the infliction of false imprisonment. And so this can look like actually locking someone in a room, or it can look like sitting on top of them to prevent them from leaving, standing in front of the door to prevent them from leaving. So both of those scenarios would count, and the amount of time is irrelevant. So, regardless if it's a couple hours or just a couple of minutes, it still applies. And number 4, physically or sexually abusing minor children. And so with this, it's kind of up to a judge's discretion because it says, discipline must conform to traditional norms. And that's tough because what is a traditional norm? So we see a pretty wide variety when it comes to the outcome of these cases. But reckless corporal punishment is not a defense in the case of a PFA. So 5 is knowingly engaging in a course of conduct or repeatedly committing acts towards another person. So this is that a reasonable person would be in fear for their safety. And this can include stalking behaviors or severe harassment.
Okay. So we just want to cover how to file a PFA in Cumberland County or Perry County. We're going to ask if you're outside of the county that you identify the domestic violence agency that provides services in your county, and the process I'm sure will be very similar. So victims can file a PFA with the assistance of a DVSCP advocate, or they can file it on their own through the courthouse. We always like that they start by calling us at our 1-800 hotline number. You can call or text that number. It's available 24 hours a day, and we can process through how to file and walk through the steps and make an appointment to schedule. If the person wanting to file a petition, there are multiple different avenues to do that. We always ask that they consider to file in the county that they are residing. It's easier for them. They're going to have to go back and forth to court, but they can choose to file in the county where the defendant lives or where the abuse occurred. So it's really up to them which county they choose. Easiest is closest to their home so that they can make those appointments and it's not a burden to them. We as advocates want to help. Part of our job is to help them fill out the legal paperwork. Ella does this every day, walking them through the steps so they are very familiar with it. They know how to do it. They'll attend the court hearings with the victim, explain the process in great detail. The court system can be very intimidating. It's helpful to have somebody that is familiar to walk you through the steps and make it a little easier. We also provide empowerment counseling and connect them to other services. Every person that's filing a PFA has the right to have an interpreter if they need one. So there's a language access coordinator in each court and county that's responsible for coordinating these interpretation services and making sure that the victim, witness, or anybody named in the case has understands what's going on and has access to that service. So here I named the specific people in Cumberland and Perry, and we will send out this PowerPoint, so you don't have to worry about writing down this information, but just so you know, there are designated people. You would contact them and they would schedule the interpreter. We're going to go into the different types of protection from abuse orders. The first one is an emergency PFA, and all protection from abuse orders are emergencies. They're, something that's happening and you're not expecting it and you're in danger. It's all emergencies, but when we are talking specifically about an emergency PFA, this is something that happens after hours, so after the court is closed. And a lot of times we're getting connected to these people through law enforcement after a domestic violence situation has happened, and they're recommending that they get this emergency order. What's important to remember about an emergency order is that they are only brief. They're only valid for a brief period of time. So they're good until the close of the next business day. So if a person is qualifying for an emergency PFA, something has immediately happened, typically within the last 24 to 48 hours. And we're talking about a physical act, the threat of a physical act, sexual violence, a threat of that, or intimidation, severe stalking and harassment. So the way you go about getting an emergency PFA is same as what I had said before. You would call our hotline and get connected to an advocate. In Cumberland County, we help connect them to that on-call MDJ. We'll do a brief Zoom hearing. There's paperwork involved. The advocate is able to navigate that. And again, that order is only valid till the end of the next business day. So the way it works is that the person would have to refile the next day for a temporary order that Ella is going to explain that whole process start to finish. But this time in any victim's relationship is such a dangerous time for, making the decision to leave. We know they're at most risk. So safety planning after, an incident has happened or you're making the decision to file an emergency PFA is so crucial. And we really encourage them to talk that through a safety plan with an advocate or, someone that they trust to know what that plan is during that time.
Okay, so I am going to explain the process of getting a PFA put in place. So whether or not you filed that emergency PFA first, or you are just filing the temporary order first, you would start by completing a petition. And at least in Cumberland and Perry counties, we give you an appointment to meet with an advocate that will fill out that paperwork for you. Like Stephanie was saying earlier, you can do that on your own in the courthouse. It's just usually easier to have someone fill it out for you. And then we will get the needed information for not only the hearing for the judge, but also for the sheriff's department to be able to serve the PFA after the hearing happens. So the next step would be reviewing the paperwork with a judge. So this is done at a temporary hearing or what's called an ex parte hearing, which means that it's for one party. It's just a one-sided hearing. So at this point, it is just the victim basically telling the judge why they feel they need a PFA. Step 3 is that the judge will grant or deny the temporary order. So ultimately the decision is up to a judge whether to put that temporary order in place. Once it is granted, the defendant will be served by the sheriff's department. If the judge were to deny the order, they're still served with a notice of hearing to say that there is a final hearing, because the temporary is to make sure that if you're in immediate danger, you're getting protection. But just because you don't get a temporary order doesn't mean that you don't have the opportunity to get a final hearing. So the fourth step would be to attend that final hearing. So at this hearing, that is when the abuser or the defendant can be present, and they can either agree to the terms of the PFA, or they can testify to the judge and sort of explain their side of the story, and the judge will make that final decision. The final order can last for up to 3 years. And so some of the relief that is provided within a PFA is that the abuser cannot abuse, harass, stalk, or threaten you. They can be evicted from the home, and they can also sometimes do limited amounts of custody or visitation. So it's going to prohibit that contact. It's also going to prohibit them from coming to your work, the children's school, places like that. And in Pennsylvania, it also orders the abuser to give their firearms to the sheriff or the police department. And the judges can also grant any other appropriate relief that you request. So this is just a little table to kind of show you the differences. So at the emergency level, we are at an MDJ's office rather than the Court of Common Pleas. So this is after hours. It is whatever MDJ is on call. Only the victim is present for that, and it only lasts until the end of the next business day. Then you get into your temporary order. That does take place at the Court of Common Pleas, but still is only the victim. And that order is good up until you get your final hearing. So this says 10 business days, but say you get scheduled for that hearing within 10 days, but then the hearing gets continued, it stays in place until they have the final hearing. And so then you've got your final order, and that is at the Court of Common Pleas, and the defendant would be there as well, and any witnesses that you want to bring. And that order is good for up to 3 years. And the next part is a PFA violation. So this is called an ICC, or an indirect criminal contempt. If the abuser violates the PFA in any way, the victim can call the police and the abuser will be arrested for the violation. So this can lead to criminal charges that can have the abuser placed in jail for up to 6 months, or be fined between $300 and $1,000. A lot of times in our counties, we see fines and probation.
Talk a little bit about some criticism that we know and we hear about a protection from abuse order. And we know protection and orders aren't a cure-all to a situation. Typically, they are telling somebody not to do something that's already illegal, like telling them that they cannot assault somebody, or telling them that they can't harass that victim. So that abuser, in order for it to be effective, needs to feel compelled to comply with the law. And so sometimes they're already showing that they're willing to violate the law. So why is this effective, and how does this help people? We know that, like Ella said, in our county, it's typically a fine or probation. Those violations aren't as harsh as victims would want to see them to be. And like I said earlier, this is a dangerous time when you're, deciding to leave or get out of an abusive relationship. So we know that sometimes that can make a bad situation worse. And, what we want to emphasize, and I think we have a couple of times, is that this is a part of a safety plan. It's not the entire thing. So we do know these things. We counsel victims on, understanding this part of the PFA. But, we also know that they are, despite all the things I said, they are effective. Protection orders can be effective as part of a larger safety plan. So, a couple of reasons why it is effective is this, when a victim stands up and makes the decision to obtain a protection order, you're telling your abuser that you're done with this situation. You're not going to allow them to continue to abuse you. You're not going to take it anymore. This is empowering. It can be empowering for the victim to just take this matter into their own hands and stand up and confront that person. It also tells the abuser, like, your behavior is serious, and we're recognizing that what you're doing is not okay. This is abuse. And, as Ella explained before, those violations are criminal charges. And so they, have the threat of obtaining a criminal charge related to this PFA. So, these are a couple of reasons why they are effective. I do know that you can read many stories of horrible things that have happened. But, being able to stand up to that person and put this plan in action along with other safety measures can really help change someone's life. There are other types of protection orders. There are something that's called a sexual violence protection order, and SVPOs are appropriate when the victim and the perpetrator do not have that family relationship or intimate partner relationship. So it's typically like a stranger, coworker, neighbors. So, if we're called for protection from abuse order, it can include sexual violence that has happened in between intimate partners. So we're always trying to determine if there is a relationship and does it meet the relationship criteria. If not, it could likely fall into one of these other categories. So the other one is the protection from intimidation order, which is appropriate where there is not an intimate relationship and the victim is under the age of 18 and the defendant is an adult. So this is not a case where there's two minors, two adults. It's the opposite of minor versus or minor and adult, and there's no relationship there. So not to put you on the spot, but after breaking down those different orders, we wanted to show you some examples and give you an opportunity to see if you can get the right answer, right, Ella?
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, Angelina, I think I do need you to share the poll.
Okay, here we go.
Thank you.
Okay, so the first scenario, Becky breaks her partner John's cell phone, slaps him, and threatens to kill him if he tries to leave the home. Would this be a PFA, PFI, SVPO, or just notify police? And we'll go through all of the scenarios and then do the answers at the end. So scenario 2, a neighbor throws a rock at your car and it breaks the window. Scenario 3, an adult neighbor is threatening physical harm towards a minor child. And the last scenario, scenario 4, a coworker sexually assaults another coworker.
Can you guys all see the polling? It looks like it's launched, but I'm not seeing any answers quite yet.
It doesn't let you answer until you do them all. It doesn't let you submit, excuse me.
Oh, gotcha.
We'll give you guys some time then.
Do you want to give just 2 minutes to answer them? Or any answers coming in, Angelina? Is it working?
I'm not seeing any answers coming in,
That's okay.
so we'll give you guys a couple minutes.
On my screen, it says 74% of people have participated in the poll. So it looks like we are getting,
Oh,
Oh,
awesome.
yeah.
Then we have people that are like, yes, I'm answering that.
We're new poll people, I guess.
All right, we'll give you guys like another couple seconds and then I can hit end poll and hopefully then our results will pop up. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end it. Stephanie and Ella, is it giving you guys an option to share the results?
Yes.
Okay, why don't you do it? Because mine says 0% answered. So if you guys want to do it, that might be better.
I actually don't know if this is working since Stephanie's sharing the screen.
Can you do it, Ella?
Okay, it says that they can see it.
Oh, great. Perfect.
All right, so just to go over the answers, and if anyone has specific questions about these scenarios, let me know. So the first one, Becky breaks her partner John's cell phone, slaps him, and threatens to kill him, would be a PFA, and it looks like a lot of people got that answer correct. The next one, an adult neighbor, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one. A neighbor throws a rock at your car and breaks the window. And that looks like most people got that correct as well. You would notify police. Scenario 3, an adult neighbor is threatening physical harm towards a minor child. And that one is PFI. And then scenario 4, a coworker sexually assaults another coworker, and that is an SVPO. So does anyone have specific questions about those scenarios?
Okay, just to, we know that there'll probably be a lot of questions at the end, so we wanted to save some time here. Is Mid-Penn Legal Service is a partner of ours. They help file those protection from intimidation orders. So I want to give you some information about them. And also the YWCA in Carlisle and Cumberland County is an asset for filing those SVPOs. So they handle the sexual violence protection orders. Again, domestic violence services, we provide free services to Cumberland, Perry County victims of domestic violence. So through emergency shelter, we have a 24-hour hotline and text line. We do individual counseling, support groups, legal assistance like we do with PFAs. Lots of different services that we can help victims with, and everything is free and confidential. So just to summarize what we have been kind of going over, and to emphasize that a protection from abuse order can help a person put an end to the power and control that they're experiencing from their abuser. It provides them with certain protections under the law that if the abuser breaks those, they can face, fine and probation and other criminal charges. If you know someone that is in a domestic violence relationship, we do encourage you to connect them to us. But as a friend, you can encourage them to report any violations of their PFA. Once they do have it, report and document them. Is really essential to continuing that safety planning and making sure that they do get those violations documented and charged in the court. We also want you to talk to them about safety planning. Where's the safe place that they can go? Do they have kind of an escape plan if they need to leave the home? Where's a safe home that they can flee to? Do they know that they can call us? Do they have, important documents put somewhere that they can access quickly? Do they have access to a vehicle? There's lots of different safety planning measures that can get put in place, and our advocates are skilled at talking through those plans with people. So encourage them to participate in counseling and just be there as a listening ear. As we know it takes people in a relationship 7 to 10 times to actually leave that domestic violence relationship. So this could be a longer process for somebody. On average, it takes several times to attempt to get out of that relationship before they stick. So if you have any questions, we're here to answer your PFA questions. And I don't know, is it easier? Well, I'll leave this up, but if anybody, Angelina, were there questions in the chat?
Yeah, I can go through them. So our first one came from Kate Lawrence, and she says, can you please explain what DVSCP means by safety plan, as children and youth world uses that phrase with a very specific and different meaning. Any of us that might do direct service with children or work around the child welfare system, definitely that term is used. So Stephanie, how would you explain what that is?
Sure, yeah, and I started to give a couple examples, but really a safety plan for that person is their exit plan if something, if the situation was too dangerous for them to remain in their home. Do they have kind of a bag in their car that they're, ready to go? Do they know a safe person they can go to? Do they, if they're on medication, do they have, a few days of that medication stored somewhere separately that they can easily leave and be okay? So really talking through the different ways of leaving a situation. Do they need to wait until that person goes to work and then leave, more safely? Ella, any other thoughts?
I think safety planning looks different for each person. So I do think Stephanie covered a lot. Something specific that we try to help with too is getting like security cameras in place once you are able to leave the residence. So just making sure that wherever you're going is going to be safe as well.
All right, thank you guys. Our next question is from Diane. Under what circumstance would a judge deny a PFA?
So earlier when we had the slides about the Protection from Abuse Act, so if a judge finds that it doesn't fall within that act, they would deny the PFA for that reasoning. Like I said before, there's kind of a different level for the temporary versus the final. So they might deny a temporary order if they don't find that you're in immediate danger. But for the final order, it would just be the overall safety in the relationship. So sometimes we see temporary orders getting denied if someone is filing, but they've already escaped to a safe place. They haven't had contact with the abuser in a couple of weeks. But then at the final hearing, they're able to get that order granted because when looking at the overall relationship, there was abuse going on.
All right, awesome, thank you. Our next question comes from Sheka. I'm very sorry if I mispronounced that. Who asks, after 3 years, can you get it extended?
Yes, so if you have violations of your PFA, with every violation, you can request a 6-month extension of the PFA. If there have been no violations, you can still petition the court to ask for an extension. You have to be able to show that there was a pattern during the PFA where you would feel that the abuser would violate or continue the abuse once the PFA expires. So you just have to ask the court to do it.
All right, thank you for that. We have another question that states or asks, what happens if the order was falsely filed?
Yeah, I think a lot of times the judges are very skilled in asking the correct questions to determine who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. If the judge had signed the order that, and you feel like that was a misrepresentation of what had happened, you do have the chance at that final hearing to tell your side of the story. So everyone, comes to the table at that point and has the opportunity to testify to what happened. And, I do really believe that, in processing through, the judges have done this for a long time and are able to kind of make those determinations.
All right, thank you. Sandy Gibson asks, should it be reported if both parties are in violation of the PFA? For example, a father puts a PFA on his daughter and then allows the daughter to move in with him.
So something that we tell people, PFAs are one way. So if you file the PFA, you can't actually violate it. The scenario here that you would have to be careful about is even if the father is allowing his daughter to move in with him, technically the daughter is in violation of the PFA if she does move in with him. So that's something to keep in mind, is only the defendant can violate the PFA, even if the plaintiff is the one kind of initiating that contact.
All right, thank you. We have another question that was emailed in prior to the start of the training, where a participant asks, is there a specific timeline in which a PFA can no longer be obtained?
Sure. A lot of times they're looking for a recent act that occurred within the last 30 to 60 days. Our court system is, it's a reactive situation, so they're waiting until something has happened. It's not a proactive, so we can't preventatively put those things in place if nothing has happened. But if something had happened multiple years ago, and for some reason this person was fearful to report it and there's still ongoing abuse, then they can still, file, and that can be heard. But a lot of times it's, looking for something more within the last 30 to 60 days.
All right, thank you. We have a question from Lisa Keck, who asks, security cameras are expensive. Is there a resource for assistance?
Sure. We as an agency are able to help, often either connect somebody with a resource for a security camera. Sometimes we have the financial ability to help with that. It just depends on the circumstances and of availability. We typically encourage people to buy cameras. There's so many different cameras out there, but there are cameras out there that don't incur a monthly charge, so you can buy just like a one-time thing and you hook it up and it hooks to your phone. Those are the ones that we've seen have been most successful, so that you don't have to worry about maintaining it month to month.
And with that, Stephanie, do you think you could touch on I know you mentioned that you can support families or victims as they're walking through the process, but I know I've recognized even from day one, whenever I put a client in touch with you, it's like such an immediate support. Can you kind of highlight when they call that number, what that support might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So when somebody calls or texts the hotline, they're connected to a trained advocate that can, offer a variety of services. So, we get the information and we're always trying to connect you to as much as possible. We want people to participate in counseling. We know it's essential to, getting out of a relationship and feeling validated and moving on and making the best decision for themselves. So counseling, we're always advocating for. We can look and see if they need a PFA or wanting a PFA. We can help with that. We have support groups that meet throughout the week at different times, and all of our clients are able to attend those different groups and connect with other people that have gone through similar things as them. So it's really important to be able to sit at a table with somebody that understands what you've been through and is validating to that survivor, to hear I've also gone through that and I get it. We have an emergency shelter, so if somebody is in a domestic violence relationship and is trying to flee from that relationship and be in a safe housing, we have temporary emergency shelter that we can offer and provide to people. So there's a bunch of different services. All of our advocates have been through extensive training and know how to navigate that system with people and get them connected.
Thank you for highlighting that. And also I know I've sent people your way, and I feel like it's worth mentioning too, that all those services aren't necessarily connected to needing a PFA. So their families and kids can receive services from you guys without stepping through the PFA process. So that's a whole other side of all the awesome stuff that your agency does. But the next question that we have is from Sherry. If a victim does not know what does not know the steps and initially contacts the police, what can the victim expect to see as the next steps? For example, would the police typically refer the victim to submit a PFA or take other measures, or will they refer the victim to the local agency?
Mhm. That's a great question. And a lot of our clients have interacted with the police. Maybe a fair number have not. But if they are interacting with the police for a domestic violence situation, they're going to, the officer has what we call a lethality assessment, and they ask the survivor certain questions and will do like a warm handoff to our agency. So they'll call with them and connect them to the advocate. The advocate can talk to them about the services that are available to them. So it's really just like a seamless handoff where that person can be directed or kind of advised in the direction that could help them.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Our next question is from Chrissy, who states, I am from a different county. I had a client request a PFA a day or two after an incident. She was denied because she did not call the police or domestic violence in the midst or directly after the incident. Is this common?
Ella, do you want to take this?
So, I like to think that it's not common in our counties, because I think our judges are pretty well trained and know that, you don't need to call the police, or domestic violence for it to be a serious enough incident. However, I do think that this does happen, and unfortunately, it's just completely up to the discretion of the judges. So I think every single situation is unique. We can never say whether or not a PFA is going to get granted or denied.
Thank you for that insight. We have another question from Sheka. Is a PFA for you and children, or does it extend to everyone in the household?
So this can depend on how you file your PFA. So you can either file it on behalf of just yourself, on behalf of just your kids, or for both you and your kids. It can't include other adults that are in the house, but it does offer a level of protection because the abuser would not be allowed in the home. So if you have other adults living in the house that are fearful of the abuser, this does prevent them from coming into the home. We can also add to the PFA that the abuser cannot stalk or harass other household members.
Thank you. And I actually saw this on your slide and didn't know it before. I know we have a lot of CASAs who had signed up and surely a lot of providers who work with children in the midst of custody situations or child welfare circumstances. I saw that guardian ad litems can also petition. Is that common, or do you guys see that being advocated for frequently?
I would say that I have not seen that very often at all. Typically what happens is like a parent or household member will file and then they get hooked up with the guardian ad litem. But there is they are able to file. So we don't see that often, but it is a possibility.
Thank you. All right, our next question is from Lisa. She asks, or she states, many individuals are worried about the abuser seeing evidence that they are using shared health insurance for therapy. I heard you say that you offer therapy. Are there free or sliding scale options that don't involve active and available insurance?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. All of our services are free. So we do provide empowerment counseling, and that wouldn't go through insurance. There's no fees. And so everything is free. There's, we're conscious to make sure there's not a paper trail for an abuser to find.
And with that, Stephanie, could you touch on if individuals have barriers to accessing those services, how you can meet children or victims elsewhere?
Absolutely. So our empowerment counseling, our counselors can go to schools and see children at schools. We do phone sessions, Zoom sessions. Sometimes we have people stepping out on their lunch break and talking to us over the phone, jumping on Zoom from their car. So really wherever is like convenient for that person, we want it to be accessible to them, and we can, you know, adapt our services to meet them where they are.
Thank you. Our next question is from Danae, who asks, what recommendations would you give to school or give to the school and how to proceed with a PFA violation? For example, if a person shows up at arrival or dismissal and attempts to access a child who is protected, what steps should the school take? Contacting parent or guardian is a given, but should the call contact the police, or is that the responsibility of the parent?
So we would recommend that the school calls the police. It doesn't just have to be the plaintiff that is reporting violations. It can be anyone that knows a violation is occurring. So just to be safe, we would recommend the school does call the police and let them know that that occurred.
Thank you. Melissa Manning asks a question and says, how are judges educated regarding the PFA law? Are there initiatives for educating them? Is there a requirement that education, or is there a requirement for that education for new judges?
That is a really great question that I actually don't have the answer to be honest. It's a question that I've also asked of like what education is there for judges to understand the victim and understand what they've gone through and take like a trauma-informed perspective. So I'm sorry, but I actually don't have an answer for that. And it's, you know, I definitely think it's a great question and something that should be looked at in our county to, well, in probably many counties, but just to how to understand the nuances that come with a survivor of domestic violence and what that PFA looks like.
Thank you. Sandy Gibson had asked a question. She said, is it common for children to testify at PFA hearings? I attended one where the judge spoke to the child in chambers.
So my experience in the hearings is that most judges will speak to the children in their chambers, but it is completely up to the judge. So we always prepare people for the possibility, you know, if it is a case involving children, that the children might have to testify in the courtroom. And so we provide support as best we can for that. But it is up to the judge. And I would say most often they're talking to the children in the chambers.
Thank you. We have another question from Danae, who asks, what supports do you provide to children who have experienced domestic violence or abuse?
Absolutely. We have empowerment counseling for children. So same as the adults, it's 8 to 10 sessions of meeting with a counselor, talking about coping skills and different things that they may have experienced. We also have a children's support group that meets once a month. And that group is really cool. It's a bunch of kids that have experienced domestic violence. So they have that shared experience, and we do different activities. We feed them dinner. We kind of work on just like self-esteem and empowerment and talking about you know, those types of topics. And currently we're partnering with Randy's House of Angels to do a Randy's Kids Club this summer. So it's something we want to do again, but that is a therapeutic group for children that have been through domestic violence. And again, just kind of working through the different things that may come up as a child that has seen and heard the things that they have experienced.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Sheka asked, people are getting creative and not using physical abuse anymore. Are there other types of PFAs, such as like for emotional abuse, etc.?
So there doesn't need to be physical abuse for a PFA to be granted. there just needs to be enough evidence to support that a reasonable person would be in fear for their safety. So unfortunately, a lot of times in the court system, emotional abuse or mental abuse is really hard to prove. So that's why we see most PFAs being granted for physical abuse or for like verbal threats of physical abuse. But if there is a severe enough pattern, we are able to ask the judge for PFAs in those cases as well.
All right, we have another question. So maybe this will be our last one, then we can wrap up some stuff. So Sherry asks, if a PFA has been filed to protect the children, whose responsibility is it to notify the schools? Is it the family or is it automatically done by the agency?
That's a great question. So we would not be the ones to notify the school. It's really on the family to communicate. And that's kind of part of safety planning as well. Like if you have a PFA, you want people to know when they leave the court, we give them multiple copies of that PFA. The Prothonotary's office is always really kind to make like numerous copies of this document. And we tell them like, give this to your neighbor, give this to the school, give this to the police, like give this to the people in your life so that they know and they have a copy and they can help support you.
All right, thank you. So with that, guys, we have a couple more minutes. So we're just going to kind of wrap up some stuff. I did just put the Cumberland County Commission for Women information in the chat, and then our guests shared certainly their information. I know that Stephanie's wonderful and will answer any type of questions. If you guys have specific questions, they are there 24/7 to be able to provide support. You can call with a client or encourage a client to call any time of the day, and somebody in Cumberland, Perry counties will answer. So they're actually getting connected to someone on the other end of the line. So it's just an incredible service that we all have available to us. Like our guest had mentioned in the beginning, you often don't know that you need a PFA until the time comes that you need a PFA. So I know we've got a lot of providers on today, and I really appreciate you guys jumping in to be able to support your clients. We will be emailing out the PowerPoint as well as some additional resources and information to everybody who attended. And again, if you have additional questions, please feel free to reach out to Domestic Violence Services. If you have questions about the Cumberland County Commission for Women, please feel free to reach out to me or to our commission. We'd love to have more members, and we will be looking forward to doing more events like this. So thank you guys all so much. Stephanie, did you have anything else?
No, you've got it covered. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you guys all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.